generation loves labels. We spend so much time searching for the perfect words or pictures that will describe us and show others who we want to be. But it's not just us defining ourselves alone. Our friends label us, social media labels us, other generations label us, and so on. You see, at some point in our lives, we stop and ask ourselves, who am I? And after hearing different labels spoken over you from different directions your whole life, it can be hard to figure out what's true. And when it comes to mental health, there are a million different labels and diagnoses out there, which don't make it any easier. When I was trying to figure out who I was, I didn't go to Jesus or my friends. I went online. All I wanted was a word that encompassed everything I was feeling, because I thought it would finally make me feel less alone. But I ended up just really confused. Learning about the word anxiety brought me a moment of relief, but I became so afraid and focused on it that I began to define myself by it. I was no longer someone who struggled with the giant of anxiety. I defined myself as anxious. So, in the midst of all that, how do we figure it out? How do we figure out who we actually are? We look at the life of Jesus. Because if anybody's identity has ever been questioned, it's been Jesus. For all of history, everyone has been trying to define and label him. But Jesus knew who he was. In fact, one day, as Jesus was walking in the wilderness, Satan taunted him by trying to get him to doubt what God had said about who he was. The enemy said, "If you are the Son of God, then tell these stones to become bread. If you are the Son of God, then throw yourself down." The enemy just kept saying it over and over. If you are, then do this or that. Everything the enemy said challenged Jesus' identity. And I don't know about you, but I've definitely had lots of moments like that too. When I'm in a crowded room but just feel super alone, and that voice in my head keeps saying I don't belong anywhere. Or when my mind has been in a dark place for a few weeks, I can't even get myself out of bed to do simple things because I feel worthless. You might not be alone out in the wilderness, but your identity will still be challenged. And for Jesus, it wasn't just in the wilderness. Despite every truth that was questioned by the religious leaders he met, or when his disciples expected him to do certain things, or told him not to do other things, he was able to stand firm and be confident. And that's because he knew who he was. Before Jesus went into the wilderness, God spoke over him and declared his identity, saying, "This is my son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased." And Jesus never let it go. He knew he was loved, and his identity determined his behavior. His identity then determined his mental health. The reason Jesus was so mentally healthy is because he never lost sight of who God said he was. And God has said the same thing about you. In Jesus, you are my son, or you are my daughter, whom I love. With you I am well pleased. And while God has a lot of things to say about who we are, the core of our identity is beloved son or daughter. When the enemy tried to get Jesus to doubt, he didn't let what God had declared over him be changed. No label from the world or from the people around him could change the fact that he was a beloved son. Jesus combated the enemy's lies with what God had said about who he was. And so can we. God says you are chosen. He says you are holy and royal. He says you're his masterpiece. Every day, we get to decide what labels will define us. So, do you want to carry the heavy weight of being the perfect student, the strong one in the friend group, good kid at home, or the one who's made a ton of mistakes? Or do you want to release that to Jesus and instead pick up the freedom of being a beloved son or daughter that no longer has to strive? Jesus is the only one that can define you. Only the one who created you can tell you who you are, which means you are not defined by what you struggle with. You are not your anxiety or depression. You're not your shame or fear. You're not your feelings. You are not what the people at school or work say about you, and you are definitely not defined by what social media says you are, or should be. Technology and media put labels on us that we're not even aware of. Each time that we stream or scroll, our minds are intaking the labels of the world. So part of the journey to mental health is putting the technology down. So, when the world tries to come at you with, if you are the beloved son or daughter of God, then you shouldn't be struggling, then you shouldn't have anxiety or depression, then you shouldn't be stressed or overwhelmed. Like Jesus, you can respond very quickly back with the truth of what God has already said about who you are. When our identity is in Jesus, it doesn't mean we're not going to struggle, but it does mean that we're not defined by our struggles. Your words matter, and that's why labels so heavily impact our mental health and our journey with Jesus. Something that radically changed the way that I view myself, that allowed me to have the same confidence that Jesus had, was speaking out what God says about me over myself. Now, it's not easy to choose the truth every time that the enemy starts to whisper in my ear. But the more that I go back to what God's already said, the easier it gets, and the better my mental health gets. So, here's the tool that opens the door to the journey of becoming mentally healthy. Take one truth about who God says you are and put it on a sticky note, on your mirror, on your phone, in your car, journal, or wherever you'll see it. And every day, waking up and saying out loud, I am, and then the truth about your identity. The Bible says that the words you say have the power of life or death. So choose to speak life over yourself. By faith, speak it out. Declare the truth of who you are over yourself. Don't just write it down, speak it out. And for the next 30 seconds, I want to invite you to just close your eyes and listen as I speak over you who God says you are. After you hear them, go back and listen again. Write down whichever one sticks out to you. Then, write that on a Post-it note and put it where you'll see it every day. Declare that identity statement over yourself every morning. Jesus modeled for us what it looks like to walk out our identity, so now we can do the same. I want to speak this out over you. In Jesus, you are fully known and fully loved. You are chosen and you were created on purpose. In Jesus, you are seen and heard, holy and set apart. You are blessed. In Jesus, you are forgiven. You are valuable. You're gifted. You are righteous. And in Jesus, you are God's beloved son or daughter in whom he is well pleased.